Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Story, where we discuss what Canada is, what Canada could be, and what Canada should be. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Canadian Story. I'm really excited for this one. My cousin and, well, I have two cousins on the line right now, Zach Gerber and Dan Leytham. Dan Leytham, welcome to the show. I've known you since the moment you were born.
Literally.
Literally. We have been the closest of comrades. We've had a falling out and a reunification. This is my oldest and probably deepest friendship that I have with you. So it's a real pleasure to have you on this show because there's a lot of synergy in our relationship, a lot of shared history, and I think a lot of shared values and definitely shared tastes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with all of
that. So I'm excited because this is also the first episode of a weekly show that you'll be joining me on to talk about entrepreneurship, labor, and how to build businesses. You and I, when we're together, are constantly riffing on these ideas. And it just occurred to me that why are we keeping this to ourselves? Why wouldn't we share this with the world? It's too beautiful to keep to ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, always looking for new ideas and, wherever that may come from.
Exactly. So a couple of things. The first is I'd like you to speak a little bit about the song you're writing, because that plays into something that you and I have talked a lot about, which is that there needs to be more private sector support for artists, but it should be private sector people deciding art that they want created and then proposing it and having artists bid on it.
I mean, that's maybe, a bit of putting it in capitalistic terms, maybe, but I feel like there's a lack of, it's not even necessarily that there's a lack of funding for arts in Canada, but there's a lack of intelligent capital being deployed, I think, in terms of...
it's misallocated in a lot of ways, and not just government funding, but I feel like the privates, there has to be a lot of rich people who, if you ask them about ideas they have of art, would have things that they want created. Yeah. And I feel like those people are just not being connected to artists. So what Dan and I are doing, for those who don't know, is Dan is an incredible musician who's a part of a band, a number of bands over the years, but he's a part of a band right now called Mucho Disaster, and he's also a solo artist. And he is currently writing a song about our grandfather, including Zach. So Dan, Zach, and I's grandfather and his farm. And would you like to share with us about that at all, Dan?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's just partially written so far. I mean, I have basically the general construction and pretty relatively ironed out melody ideas and lyrics for first verse, chorus type thing. But it's not finished yet. But just working with the idea of untold Canadian stories, and
yes.
Our grandpa was from and basically grew up his whole life in a town called East Garifraxa, which was near near the Grand Valley River and out Orangeville way, probably about 45 minutes or so from Toronto. And just the heroics of
just tilling the land, right? Just being there, getting it done.
An honorable day of labor, day in, day out, providing for your family through the Great Depression. And then at the end of the day, having a place of your own that, you're the master of your domain and,
that's your land. This is your place in the world, right?
Exactly. And you're responsible for it. Nobody's coming along to hold your hand or whatever.
No one's coming to save you. It's just you. Yeah. This is your world.
Yeah. You live and die at the fate of your own ingenuity and work,
I mean, basically you're responsible for, and then not only that, in the case of our grandfather, being responsible for 5 daughters.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a pretty rare thing to have that many children nowadays. But like that's a big responsibility for anyone who has kids. They know how big of a responsibility that would be, and how we just shouldered that and carried it through.
Well, it is a big responsibility, but also it's a bit of a necessity as well to have that many kids, because you essentially need that free labor.
You need a workforce.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, speaking of workforces, Dan has had this incredible idea that he and I were just riffing on recently, where he's like, one of the things that we're just not discussing is labor and the importance of it. So for those who don't know, Dan and I started a roofing company in 2016. Dan has made it quite successful, and he has learned some invaluable lessons over the last 4 years in what it really takes to run a startup without investment capital. So like basically you've done this you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. You're literally an entrepreneur who nobody has ever invested any money in you except for yourself. You did this all by yourself. Mm-hmm. And that has been and something I've noted, he built a roofing company. So he's like, I'm going to go into one of the hardest, most competitive businesses in the whole world, and I'm going to become successful at it without any help. And so that's kind of part of your story. But why don't you tell us some of the lessons you've learned in having to overcome the obstacles of building a business without what I would say generally most entrepreneurs will ask for money before they start their business.
Yeah, it is kind of en vogue, let's say, these days to start your business on debt, right?
Yes.
And there's definitely that can definitely be a working model for lots of people. But yeah, I mean, I was when I started my first business, I was probably about like 21 or something like that, and so I started climbing up from there. I had a bit of like roofing experience, but like back to when I was like 17 or whatever, I had my first roofing job and all that. And you just start out, get jobs where you can, and you have to like scratch and claw your way, and you can't be pretty about it. It's one of the
no, this is a messy business. Well, and it's hard to be pretty about roofing too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like early on, you're just like, you're thrilled to get a job, right?
Right.
And so and then over time, it's like, yeah, I'm not touching that for any less than X amount of dollars.
Tell the story. So for those who don't know, Dan broke his heel and has had to run his business without even being able to be on the roof, but is very happy with his employees who've done a phenomenal work. But I love the story you tell of the employees looking up at that one roof that you got shortly after hurting your heel. Tell the audience what they said to you.
Yeah. So I had I'd been in a great place actually before I hurt my heel. I broke it, my calcaneus, in like late July, I guess, of this year. And so I was in a great spot as far as business wise. I had like tons of job contracts lined up, and we were just like rocking and rolling basically. And then I broke my foot, and I like had been sort of answering emails and phone calls and stuff like that as well, but kind of fairly incapacitated. It was very tough mentally dealing with that amount of pain and all that. So anyways, I had to basically take a couple of weeks of being pretty ineffective and all that. And so, you're just trying.
Which folks is not unreasonable for someone who's shattered his heel in 6 different pieces and can't even walk and is on painkillers. And Dad's like, well, I was a little bit off my game for a bit.
I demand excellence for myself. So
yeah, I like that. You expect excellence for yourself. Yeah. I like that.
But yeah, so I was a little delayed getting out to some quotes and stuff like that. So reasonably enough, certain people had like signed on with other places and stuff like that. So I was, trying to, still run a, decently sized company through all that. And I had gotten to quote this one job, and it was just like logistically kind of a nightmare. Like it was a 2-story house. On either side of it was a 1-story house with a metal roof. So it's like you got to tear off all the shingles.
No.
Messy process, and that's time consuming, right? Because you got to set up job site protection and all that. So anyways, the guys got. Oh, and then it was like in a downtown area where it was all like tight corridors and stuff like that. And so it's just a tough job. And I quoted it high, like I didn't go low on it necessarily, but I was like, yeah, I'll go, decently high on it. And, it's a bit of an annoying job, but whatever. And so anyways, sure enough, we get there for the first day. And like, I knew, like, I was like, the guys aren't going to like this. And so, yeah, we pull up and like, I can just see like their face. They're just like dejected. And the one guy was like, Dano, what's this? Like,
are we hard up for? Oh yeah, the other guy.
Yeah, he was like, are we hurting for work, Dano? And he was like, what's this? And I was like, it's a job, buddy.
Well, and I want to dig into that, right? Because as an employee who has to do the labor, he's looking at this, and his immediate question is looking to you as the authority and questioning you, right? And not in a bad way, but that is that mindset. So as an employer, how do you instill confidence in your employees?
That's a great question. I think really the way to instill confidence is to demonstrate competence, really. And I think when you are running an operation where people and your employees in particular can see that like you've got it under control, you have a plan,
you're executing that plan,
right? They know what to expect, right?
Yeah, it's creating an environment that makes them feel secure, right?
Exactly, and safe. And that ties into another kind of principle of mine that I've been working with over the past year in particular. So is I tell the guys, I don't expect you to give 100% every day. I just don't. That's not actually reasonable. And but at the same time, I want you to aspire to something good. I don't want, it's striking a balance. You can't come in here and slack off. So what we're looking for is consistency, right? Where you come in every day, you know what you're going to give, you know what you're going to get, right? And then if you are, finding yourself in positions where you can give more, then, I'll keep note of that. And like I gave raises to both of my installers this year through a pandemic, right?
Yeah. Well, you did very well considering the circumstances. You were able to keep them working, I believe, every single day, despite the fact that you're in this immense pain and you're not even operational. You can't even move around.
Exactly.
And actually, I want to speak to that because you and I have talked about this a lot. There's a lot of talk out there about how labor is so important. And you've mentioned to me, labor is not just important, it's essential in the roofing business.
Yeah.
Like good labor is how you make or break a roofing company.
Exactly. Yeah. Because early on, I was kind of looking at the whole like roofing market when I was determining whether I wanted to get into it or not on a business level. And I'd been observing it for a bunch of years because, like I said, it was one of my first
summer jobs
in high school type thing. And I kind of like I was looking at it because I was like, from a marketing and sales standpoint, I knew like I could just like I could crush it going on.
Crush it, yes.
But what I think I undervalued early on was the value of labor, and good labor, because there's like it's and I would really like to revolutionize how that industry is conducted in terms of pay scale and stuff like that.
There we go. So you tell us more about this.
So yeah, I do think that like roofing and really the labor, like the labor in the trades in general is fairly underpaid, and I'd love to see more people that have sort of like the mind and intelligence to become a lawyer, like get into that and like start their own businesses. Because honestly, like you can, if you're smart and you can own your own company and manage things that way, which is a bit more involved and intense than just being your own labor, but you can easily make much more as a owner of a trades company than you could or like it's not
if you own a good roofing company and you treat your employees well, you're going to make way more than a Bay Street lawyer.
Yeah. If you're just a lawyer who like shows up as a job and isn't part of the ownership of the firm, you can definitely make a lot more in a company related to the trades than, you know, working for a wage, even in a industry like law. Yeah, I think
it's about ownership, right? Your idea here is to make labor view ownership over their own work in a different way, right?
Yeah, and that's something that we've discussed as well, is like, you know, I'm debating for this year, you know, putting a plan in place where I can actually like give my key employees equity in the company so that they have ownership over the outcomes, right? And it's not just, oh, you know, we're doing all this to benefit Dan. No, like we're all actually part of this.
We're all benefiting from this. The better job we do on this, the more we benefit as individuals. Yeah,
exactly. And like, you know, I think for so long the attitude was like, you know, oh, like, you know, I'm the boss, I get to dictate how things are, blah blah blah. But I think whether it's just like the current stage of capitalism we're at or what, but the wage that you're paid is almost like it's taken for granted essentially, right? And that's like the base qualification as far as what employees are looking for from the employer. And then beyond that, it's like, how am I treated? Is this, you know, a situation where I can enjoy coming into work every day? And that's something I try to do as well. And strike that balance is like, you know, I want to obviously have some high standards as far as like our performance and stuff like that, and have to, you know, sometimes quote unquote lay down the law as far as like if, you know, didn't have the best day or whatever, and all that. But at the end of the day, it should be a place where your employees like coming to work, right? They like who they work with. They enjoy the day, you know, and work hard in the meantime. But
well, you're spending so much of every day working if you're working a 9 to 5, or if you're and obviously roofing is not a 9 to 5. It's more of like a 13-hour day or a 10-hour day.
It's elastic depending
because you don't work every day of the year, right? You've got the winter, at least. Well, some people do, but one of the things that you've talked a lot about is labor itself not being like just laboring is not valuable. Labor itself, just as labor. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's also predisposition in you know, the modern psyche. I think maybe partly because it's so just standard to like have a job, you know. It seems like right now, I don't know if it's like, I feel like a lot of the air has come out of like entrepreneurialism, and I feel like, you know, 10 years ago everybody was like, oh, I have a business, and you know, it was, you know, something that brought in, you know, $150 a week at like a craft show. I'm not trying to like pick on any one whatever, but the point being, like, it was cool to like have your own like little gig or whatever. And then I think, like, you know, some people realize like, oh, that wasn't worth it or whatever, and it's like, it's actually hard running a business. And that's why so many people, I think, you know, a job is so appealing, right? Because you're absolved of any kind of risk or responsibility, and you know, you don't have to take out liability insurance to be at work. You know what I mean? Whereas,
right.
I pay $2,000 a year to make sure that I don't get buried or something bad doesn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Where did you start that?
Well, it's just labor is not inherently valuable, and I think this is a concept that is going to offend some of our listeners, but I'm happy to offend when I'm trying to teach a point. So I'd like you to also happily offend.
Yeah. So basically, like, point being, I think, and I have friends too that take the stance that, you know, profit equates to exploitation, which is just not true. You know,
right.
Like, the fact that if there's a job that needs done, I'm able to locate the work, marry that particular segment of labor to a worker who is able to competently do the work, so the customer is satisfied, and then you know, be able to provide resources to the employee who is doing that work. that's valuable and as much of a job in and of itself as doing like manual labor or stuff like that. And the point that I was making to you before about like labor is not inherently valuable in and of itself. You need to be able to organize and create efficient systems for labor where just because I have a pile of rocks in my front yard and like somebody comes along and like moves it from one side of the yard to the other, that's not
a productive use of labor.
Right. It's very tough,
It's a lot of work.
Pretty sore after, but I'm not paying you to do that,
Right.
Unless there's a purpose behind why I'm asking you to do that, so.
And that's the executive function, right? Mm-hmm. That's the entrepreneurial function, is to take chaos and bring order to it. And you've talked about a fair bit about how much stress that is as well, right? Because like the whole weight is on your shoulders. All the risk, everything is you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And like, you're responsible for making sure that, there's enough money in the bank, there's work coming through that the guys can do. And you're really, you're building a whole ecosystem of labor and capital,
And as you've said to me many times, there's a reason they call it an organization.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And things, things inherently need to be organized, and that's what, like you said, that's what a business is. It's bringing order to chaos, right?
Yeah, I love that. Okay, well, and on that note, I'd like you to kind of describe your true, not that entrepreneurship isn't your true passion, but like your number one passion, at least as long as I've known you, which is your whole life, has been music. And I want you to talk a little bit about how you're different than a lot of your fellow musicians.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not up for debate that I am different than, people who are typically involved in the arts and, music in particular. Like, I know I went to Mohawk College for classical piano, and I just, it's a bit of a different type of person, I guess, in that context that was there as opposed to who I believe myself to be. And it's just, I don't know. I always, from like some of my earliest memories were just being like in awe of like sound, and I remember hearing like J.S. Bach play on the speakers in my house when I was like 3 years old. And I was just like, what is that?
It's beautiful, right?
And just like, and I think like a lot of the people that I went to school with, I think like sometimes it was like they enjoyed music, but I just feel like it was so much of like a ego measuring contest as far as like, people would come in and be like, oh, talking like all these chord extensions and stuff like that. And as if the intellectual exercise of it was what made it inherently good. And I feel like,
keep going on this. This is exactly what I wanted you to talk about.
And I feel like there wasn't maybe a lot of like soul, it was very dry and rote, everybody trying to sound like each other and copy and whatever. And like, man, like just
or like what's popular? How do we become famous? How do we?
No, not even that, honestly. Because they were like kind of diving into in particular like jazz and stuff. And I love jazz. It's a great art form, but like, but they were of the opinion, I think, in a lot of ways that like jazz was like the be all end all. That was like the pinnacle of, musical performance. And so we're just going to get in our little echo chamber of like, jazz performance, and, everybody else who like those non-jazzers, like they don't really, get music.
They don't
like
get
that.
it. They don't get right.
Yeah. It was all like entrance to a kind of,
Zach, have you heard a lot of that? Because Zach's also been in the music industry for a long time. Zach, have you?
His would be a bit different, I think, because he wasn't like with Walk Off the Earth, like that is a bit more of like a poppy rock thing.
True.
I see both. I see both though, because we've had Joel went to Mohawk, their drummer, for starters. So he didn't finish. And then we had a trumpet player come in, and I'm not sure. I don't think he went to Mohawk either. but he was incredibly educated. But what was cool about him, to kind of counter your point, is that he had all of the intellectual knowledge and he had all of the chord extensions and all of the notes and all of that, but he also had the soul and just had a passionate love for pretty much any music. And I think that I would say that's maybe the reason that he got the job touring.
Yeah, probably.
Right.
And actually that really well describes what I think of you, Daniel, is that you actually do have the technical knowledge as well, but the technical knowledge isn't what you love about music.
Right. But I think there is a point to that, though, that the intellectual side of it and the technical knowledge is useful. Like I wouldn't go as far as to say necessary, honestly, but definitely very useful in like being able to execute different ideas, right? And
but the creativity, and this is something you've talked a lot about with chess, but the creativity is the key. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, well, like with chess, and chess seems to be a great analogy for so many things in life. But I think, with chess, like you got to have the fundamentals down. But what separates a good player from a great player is the imagination and the ideas that they're capable of generating. And you can be a very good player and just play, simple good moves, and like you could be, one of the best in the world, But those truly elite performers in chess and in music as well, it's the originality of the ideas that they're generating.
It's special.
Yeah, nobody would have quite come up with it like that.
Yeah. Well, and this is what makes the sound of the great bands, right? Is that
sounds like the Beatles.
Nobody sounds like them. Exactly.
Yeah.
What is it like to not rely on music as a musician for any part of your income?
I just don't even see it as something like I hate even honestly thinking about like monetizing it. If I get money coming through music related, obviously I'm happy, but I just kind of made the decision a few years ago to just decouple that from to separate my income in commerce from art. And
how freeing is that? Because I feel the same way about politics. It was only 2 years ago that I separated my financial well-being from my political reality, and the level of freedom that I felt from that has been arguably almost dangerous for me, because it's really taken me on some very, I'm great, I'm awesome episodes. But at the core of it, that freedom means everything to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it's like for you in terms of art, but I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, I think, because I was and it was so kind of, sad a little bit in a way, honestly, to observe, even the top professors at Mohawk, they actually make pretty good money. I think, the department heads, there's probably a half dozen of them or so that make probably about $150K a year from their teaching position at Mohawk, and then performing and gigs and stuff like that on the side. But the lesser teachers, who are also pretty incredible musicians and had dedicated their entire lives to doing that, they kind of barely got by,
and these are the people who are at the top of their game. What about your regular musician who's trying to
they're playing concert halls and stuff, and to 1,000, 2,000 people routinely, but there was this whole push, I think, especially coming from Mohawk, that was you haven't been a success musically unless it's your full-time job. And I think that was so deflating for so many people, because it's very tough to make consistent and good livings creating music, even though it's something that is so integral to our lives, which maybe it would be interesting to reevaluate how we value music, but that's a whole different topic of conversation. But all that to say, there was plenty of professors that were like phenomenal musicians who were just like struggling to get by. And like at one point, I remember having a conversation with a friend, and there was a professor that had come from Mohawk. He was a buddy from Mohawk. And the professor was like, oh yeah, just kind of whining about like how hard it was to make it as a piano player and whatever. And he was like, my buddy was like, have you ever, I think he considered like, I forget how he put it, but it was like, have you ever considered like, working?
Getting a job. Yeah. Well, and this is interesting because I know that there will be musicians who say that you can't be truly great at your art if you're distracted. But I think you're truly great at your art. And I think the world is about to see that in a lot of different ways with some of the stuff you have coming out. How you've just completely rejected this notion altogether. You've rejected the notion that you have to choose, and you said, I'm going to do both. Why don't I? Did you make that decision consciously, or was it just kind of how your life evolved?
Yeah, I made it consciously for sure. Cause I was like, I've always wanted to like, to do music and all that. And like, I just like, I reached the point where like, I was working at a studio in Toronto, and, like things were going pretty well, and like I was working with some cool people and stuff like that. But to the point about like how hard it is to make it, like you can be involved in some, cool things. Like I was doing stuff with one of the Weekend's producers a bit and stuff like that. But to the point of like, it's hard to, make it financially viable. I reached a point where I was like, well, yes, superstardom's like not like there right now, so
yeah.
And I don't want to like keep living in this financial
like basically in like poverty.
Essentially, and so I was like, and then I also reached the point where I was like, well, my music and my art really isn't benefiting by me not having money either, right?
Right.
So,
well, yeah, because psychologically you're in this place of stress, and like, how are you supposed to be truly creative if you're wondering what you're going to eat tomorrow?
Yeah, exactly. And also like, related to like, I can't afford to buy like the gear I want and stuff like that.
Right. Yes. Well, and one of the reasons that we're starting this show with Dan and I, the Lexicon of Labor, it's not just about small business. It's also going to be about art. And one of the things that I want to say about art, and I'm not an artist, but I would say that I'm a lover of art, but like a huge lover of art. I think I have the same appreciation for art as Dan and Zach do, just the inability to play anything worth anyone hearing. But my point on that is, I want to decouple this idea, this scarcity mindset, the scarcity mindset of a person's own talent, right? So there's people out there who don't believe they could be great at something if they didn't dedicate everything to it, right? And I see you as a living example of proving that wrong, that you can have both. It's the same as women who say, well, you can't have a career and children. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it'll be a little harder, but I hold you up, Dan, as an example of someone who broke free of these social norms that are teaching us we can only do things one way. And you're like, no, I'm going to be a great artist, but I'm also going to not live in poverty.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, it's kind of timely. I heard this quote actually from Conor McGregor. He's got a fight coming up on Saturday. And it was actually a quote of his back from 2013, I believe it was. And his quote was, like Vincent van Gogh, he lost his mind in his game. I have lost my mind also, but I'm happy with that. I feel to reach a high pinnacle in anything you do, you must become insane to what you are doing.
No, you gotta love Pimlico, man. You gotta love Pimlico.
Yeah, and like I thought, man, that is so true. Like to achieve anything great, you have to be. Obsession is the path to greatness.
Yes.
And I think it's tough to let go of it's the FOMO essentially, you know, like and I think with the internet age, I don't know if you could say we have a lack of greatness right now. I don't know, you know, maybe.
Well,
that's just,
you know what, Peter Thiel agrees with you, right? And there's a lot of people who do, is that we haven't seen real human innovation on a let's make our lives better sort of scale. We've seen huge innovation in tech, but has that made our life better? I mean, the people who made the social dilemma would argue has made our lives a lot worse. And in fact, not only has it made our lives worse, it's made our relationships worse. And there's no doubt of that.
I think it's made our minds worse as well, because I think like I've been weirdly trying to put myself in the shoes of like someone who lived in like the 1950s, which I mean, that was already, you know, had you know, several of the staples of modern life involved in that you know, era of time. But really, like from that period and like before even, people had so much time with their own minds, you know, to just like explore.
I thought about that too. It's like you're not distracted by anything.
Yeah, there's no Netflix to turn on. You know, you could maybe read a book. You know,
right? Which is, and I want people to understand. There's a huge difference. I know that like. Here's the difference the difference between watching something or even listening to something. And I'm saying this as a podcaster, but the difference between reading is categorical. They're not the same. Because when you're reading,
active intake versus passive.
Thank you. Yes, that's exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, actually, Dan has a great song coming out. We don't know when, but I want you to tell the listeners about the concept around it, and then we'll take that, how we're talking about the concepts around songs, and we'll talk about your and I's favorite, well, our song, our together song, right?
Yeah. Are you talking about the comforts of modern living?
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's a song I wrote like a few months ago called "The Comforts of Modern Living," and yeah, basically the concept behind the song is like. It's not an indictment, but it's not a celebration of modern life either.
It's an observation. It's an observation. Yeah.
Yeah. And the lyrics are like a tad abstract. It's not being like super literal with like iPhones are bad or you know, or good or whatever the case may be. But basically, it's talking about like. How everything's at our fingertips and all the comforts that we could ever imagine or want are right there for us. You know, like we've talked about, like, you know, we can just order food now and it just comes right to our door.
Just shows up.
On demand.
Anytime we want.
Leave the house, you know?
Yep.
But maybe, you know, back in the day, you're getting in your car, you're going for an excursion, and who knows what you run into, right? Like,
or the thoughts you have on that drive.
Right. And what you see just by happenstance, and and I mean, maybe something else happens at home, but it's just such a reality defining shift that, like, you know, we're putting ourselves in different positions now than we were before. And like all for the sake of like immediacy and comfort, you know?
Yeah. Our whole thought matrix now is around maximizing comfort. And so my brother-in-law had wasn't a podcast, it was a YouTube channel called Stay Uncomfy. And I feel like your life is basically an embodiment of that concept, right? You're like, I'm going to stay uncomfortable because discomfort is what causes growth.
Right. Yeah. And I do believe that for sure. I mean, there was like, with my business, for example, there was so many challenges and, you know, all that getting it started. And like, I had to learn a whole lot, you know, and, but at the same time, I feel like every time in my life where I've gone through something like challenging like that, where I've had to, you know, adapt or die, essentially, it's like, you know, it's a cliche.
You've adapted. You've adapted.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when you do face that and adapt, and like, you know, for next time, and that's what experience is, you know.
And this goes to something you and I talk about a lot. Failure is not the enemy.
No, failure, like I think it was Peter Thiel, actually, to bring it back again to him, who raised the point, you know, there was a time around 2010 where failure was like super sexy and like the entrepreneurial or whatever. And it was like, everybody was like, it was like, own your
resume of failures. Yeah.
And Peter Thiel was like, back when I was starting out in business, failing was a bad thing, I don't want to like, I don't want to like over glorify it, but yeah, I mean, like you can learn absolutely as much from a failure as you can from a win. And if you,
I think you could actually learn more. Well, you should learn more from a failure than a win.
Yeah.
Because if you're not learning from your failures, then what are you doing?
Mm-hmm, yeah. It kind of goes back to the conversation we've had a few times about like maximizing your strengths versus shoring up your weaknesses, and like what the proper balance of that is. And it's an interesting conversation.
That's a topic. That's a topic I want to do on our next week's episode. Actually, is what it like because I think our society has completely lost their minds on failure. They treat failure so some treat failure as an indelible black mark on your character. So if you say one wrong thing, the mob will come for you. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's on one side. And then on the other side, parenting, helicopter parents, we're trying to avoid even a single failure, like any discomfort isn't allowed. And so, I think that's a topic, but that's too long of a topic for right now. We only have 10 minutes left. I want to go, we'll go into the songs maybe the next time, but one of the things I really want to talk with you about is the working class. You've experienced some real tragedy around the opioid crisis in your life, but more importantly, you're on the front lines of that crisis. And you maybe talk a little bit about the tragedy you're seeing in the world, but also what you think can be done about it.
Yeah, I think it's a lot worse than people really realize, to be honest. It's like, like you can, everybody can kind of identify, like your, the homeless person that you see that just looks really messed up. It's like, oh yeah, must have a problem with drugs type thing. But there's a lot of like really like, beautiful kids and just like good people, solid character and all that. And I think one of the biggest things to realize is that being a drug addict in no way reflects your character.
Thank you, because I think a lot of people think of drug addicts as these degenerates. Drug addicts are people who got caught in a dopamine cycle that they can't get out of.
Yeah And in roofing, like I would say like a good half at least of people that like you'll try to
half of the workforce, folks, half of an entire workforce addicted to opioids, pretty much, right?
Yeah, I mean that's that's recently for me. I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say like half of everybody in roofing is like an opioid addict, but yeah, I mean, like of the past.
Sorry, I have a habit for hyperbole, as Dan knows very well. But this is a real problem that you're encountering on a semi-daily basis.
On a daily basis, for sure. Yeah. And it's really just sad. Like I had a guy this year that he was expecting a kid and he managed to get clean, but I had him working with me through the summer, and I remember like there was days where like, he'd come in the morning and just be like, the whole morning just like completely like looking like sick to his stomach and like gut wrenching and like and all that. And you needed to use, and it was just like, and just hearing and being with him directly every day. And just hearing him from his own mouth saying like, I wouldn't wish this feeling on my worst enemy, and knowing how truly he really meant that, just like in absolute agony, and then, I mean, I had an employee last year that I'd been really concerned about through the entirety of the year, really. And he lost his like girlfriend, I guess, earlier in the year, or not like she didn't die, but like they broke up. Yes. And he was just like heartbroken over it. He was like 24 22, 24 at the most. And, I felt that at that age too, like, just like, your girlfriend's like your world, and like, you just, you don't want anybody else. And like, you're just like, so like he had been like, he was such a smart and bright kid too. Like when you like, my mom, like,
Yes.
kind of like a church mouse type character,
Right.
She was like, oh, she met Alex, and she was like, oh, I just love that Alex. Like, he's such a sweet boy. And like, just thought he was the sweetest kid. And I'd been concerned about him all year. Cause like, he would show up and he could build anything, man. Like, I'm telling you, like, I would be like, Alex, like, I need this section of like the roof, like completely reframed, which like, involves like a lot of, geometry and like, tricky cuts and piecing it all together. And like, it needs to be solid, and he would just nail it every time. Like, young kid, like I said, but just like so bright. And, I'd been worried about him. Cause like he'd, miss work, and then he'd come in and like, he would be like sleeping like at lunch and stuff like that. Like, clearly like drug induced and all that. And, he worked with me all year. And then like over the winter, whether it was just like, we didn't have as much going on as far as work to keep him preoccupied or whatever. I can't say what was going on like in his own head, but yeah, like he took his life. And, it just like, I'd had people close to me that like had committed suicide. Well, not close to me, just I guess people that I knew. And he was I would say the closest person to me that's, done that or that's happened to. And it was just like, it's quite a jarring moment, and
well, I know you were incredibly gutted by it, and you describe a moment where you're listening to a song and how that song spoke to you. And I guess that brings it full circle to the power of art. A song that we both love, which is, it's by Death Cab for Cutie.
Marching Bands of Manhattan.
Marching Bands of Manhattan. And there's a line in that song that I want you to talk about for a little bit, but it's, sorrow drips into your heart through a pinhole, and there is comfort in the sound.
Yeah, just like a faucet that leaks and there's comfort in the sound.
Yes,
It says, but while you debate half empty or half full, slowly rises, your love is going to drown. And like, I had that song come on in the car, and like literally just wept, like, just like, oh, and
because that's what great art does. Great art describes what it feels like to have something happen.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because in that, by listening to that song, I could just feel the energy that like might have been like going through his mind as he's, considering like to end his life, and like how sorrowful must a place that,
like how bad does it have to get for that to happen? And then I guess
what must you be feeling inside?
Yes, exactly.
It's not about the.
It's not about external. Yeah, it's not about external anything.
But like the existential terror.
And it's also about that, that dripping sorrow that's slowly building up, and your love is going to drown. Oh, it's just such a good line.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I mean, Death Cab, we've talked about this so many times before. They're not nearly as famous as they should be.
No, for sure. I think it's partly because like the lead singer doesn't necessarily have like a typically great or like powerful voice. It's kind of like thin, and he doesn't sound like a singer per se. He's more of like a lyricist who can kind of carry a tune. So I don't know. He's
an incredible lyricist, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. But I love him. I would say that they're one of the most like underrated bands of the modern era. I think like them compared to like a lot of the bands that they get like kind of compared to in like the indie scene, if you want to call it that. I think they're just like head and shoulders better than
right. Yeah, than all those guys. Yeah.
And then they haven't really written like a pop smash hit either. Like, I mean, Crooked Teeth was kind of a somewhat big song, but like they've never ever tried to write like the big song,
No, exactly.
But to your point about great music making you feel something, or like offering you a perspective, I think something that I've been bringing up a lot lately that kind of like I do it somewhat for shock value, I think, to be honest, just because like people who know me and like, I like, I'll like study jazz in my free time. Like it's kind of, it takes people, catches people off guard a little bit, but Taylor Swift's first album.
Yes. You brought this up to me and it shocked me. But then when I listened to it, I was like, he's right. This is incredible. Yes, I'd love for you to explain this. This is this is a great insight.
Yeah, her first album, Fearless, and I think honestly she's had good stuff since then as well. Like, and I'm not like a super fan or anything like that, but I think in particular that first album, there's absolutely a reason why that. And like Love Story and stuff like that was obviously a huge hit on itself, but that album as a whole, and she had so many hits from that album, and I think why is it's just a magical encapsulation of like a 16-year-old girl's feelons,
Yes. And go. Yeah, give us some examples because you do so good on this.
like I don't know if you want like song by song or what, but I just think like so.
A few lyrical clips is what I want that encapsulate what you're trying to describe.
Yeah, I might get some of the lines wrong, but I'll try to get like the general theme of them. Like I remember she has one line. It's about like the song's about like this guy and like it's like most of her songs are, but the chorus goes like something along the lines of we're screaming and fighting and kissing in the rain and it's 4 a.m. and I'm cursing your name. She just has like so many like little gems like that and just like musically too, it's like the melodies like fit the whole like energy, and like I think it's very tough. It's one of the tough things to nail about songwriting, I think, is that like, balancing lyrical feel versus what that communicates alongside the music, right?
You've talked about this, but music is distilled emotion. And lyrics should amplify the emotion. If they're not amplifying the emotion of the music, then your lyrics suck.
I can weigh in on this because I'm actually
I'd love to hear this, Zach.
I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan. Not so much like maybe some of her later stuff. I feel like it kind of tapered off. But anyway, for me, I think what Taylor Swift does so effectively, what she is to me is she's an incredible storyteller. And you talk about the distillery of emotion.
I agree with that.
The reason I think that her lyrics connect with people so deeply is because when a person is experiencing the emotion, they know that emotion is truth, but they don't necessarily have the words to describe and understand it. And I think what Taylor Swift does a lot, is that she very clearly sums up the emotion in easy to understand word and story that immediately cuts to the core of everyone who's ever felt that emotion.
Oh, and Zach. Yes.
that's what pop music is essentially, right? It's like at its best, it's like it's harnessing these like extremely deep emotions that might like exist kind of in random places in society, and just like pop music is a lightning bolt, it strikes down the center, and it cuts to it cuts all the fluff is cast aside,
Yes.
And you're just left with it's Main Street, There's nothing wrong with Main Street.
I think the three of us are going to be talking about music and things like that for the rest of our lives if we're doing this every week.
There is, by the way, one Canadian that, speaking of Taylor Swift, that Taylor Swift, in fact, worships, that goes by the name of Joni Mitchell.
Yes. And next time we'll talk about Joni Mitchell and Leonard Cohen and why we think, I think that Leonard Cohen is the greatest Canadian who doesn't have the reputation that like Terry Fox has a reputation that is worthy of him. Wayne Gretzky, a lot of our greatest people have good reputations, but Leonard Cohen is the unsung hero of our music scene in my mind. So we'll discuss that. And Zach, next time I'd like you to weigh in more on that as well, because obviously Zach has a pretty deep appreciation for not only music, but the music scene itself. Unfortunately, man, this has been so great. to have you on here, Dan.
There would be no Taylor Swift without Joni Mitchell. Don't get that twisted.
Exactly. Yeah. So on that note, we got to go. But thank you so much for coming on, Dan. It's going to be great to do this with you weekly. I love your insights. I hope everyone else loves them as much as I do. If you don't love them as much as I do, I don't care, because we're doing this every week. So I'm doing it because I love it, and the rest of you guys can figure out why I love Dan so much and why I want him to be educating you all like he educates me on the many creative things that pop into his head.
Love you, bro.
Thank you for listening to The Canadian Story. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The CAD Story. That's the CAD Story. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Let's work together to remind Canadians how great their country is.